Alright, so I want to delve straight into some deeper concepts about reality, about life, about spirituality, religion, atheism, and philosophy. So I want to clear some things up from my own perspective. I want to speak to you in a very balanced and logical way about the universe, about what we don't know from my own perspective. I want to talk to you about what could potentially exist underneath all of this, underneath reality. What happens when we die? Where do we go? Can consciousness exist external to an organic life form? Is consciousness just a byproduct of the brain? I want to shed some light on this phenomenon, about all of this supernatural, extraterrestrial, paranormal activity. I want to talk to you from my own perspective and from my own beliefs, from my own perception about what this means and how it can all work together. So, look, if you're an atheist, you probably think that this is a load of utter and complete bullcrap. And I can't blame you. I used to be an atheist as well. The majority of my life, I was a very hardened atheist. I believed in what I saw. I only believed in science. I didn't believe in all this paranormal, spiritual bullcrap that you have hippies and new age people raving about. Because I know what you're thinking. You think, okay, so science is proven, science is reliable, it is peer reviewed. There is so much to science that we are constantly discovering, and it is credible. Journals, peer-reviewed articles are checked. They need to go through all of these systems. They need to go through these structures to make sure that everything that is bullcrap is filtered out, so they get the truth. They get rock hard, solid evidence that people can actually believe in, because people can see the evidence. And all this spiritual stuff, look, it's good as a concept, it's good in theory, but it doesn't exist. There's no proof that any of this exists. Don't you think that there would be some sort of evidence to suggest that there are spirits, deities, and all of these different things exist? Especially if these concepts are so big, including heaven and hell, including spirit. Why is there no form of evidence for it? Why is there no liable evidence, no liable data that suggests that any of this exists? So, entities, aliens, all of that, why aren't videos plastered over YouTube and everybody can see them? Why don't you see people walking down the street levitating? Why don't you see all these paranormal gifts and things that people claim to have, that people claim to exist? Why don't you see people taking advantage of these abilities, if they do exist, of fortune tellers being able to make a lot of money, from people making business models around these said abilities? Why is there no indication that there's any form of a God? If there is a God, he must be a piece of shit, you know, letting us go through this. You look into the Bible, you look into all these different books, all these different readings about these claims. But look, if there's a God, if there is a deity, why does he let good people suffer? Why doesn't any of this make sense? So, let me clear some things up for you. And this gets very complicated. This has layers, reality has layers. But let me tell you, from my own perspective, from my own beliefs, from what I've experienced, from what I've read, from literally millions and millions and millions of reports all over the world, from me meeting hundreds of people and speaking to them about experiences that they have had that cannot be justified, that cannot be slotted under empirical evidence, that no matter how much people try and convince other people, there's just no way to say what really happened. So, I'm going to tell you that, again, from my own perspective, most of this, I'm not saying that there's no bullshit out there. I'm not saying that there's no phonies and people who pretend to have gifts and abilities, because the vast majority of people would claim that. The vast majority of people are ordinary, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that there isn't some notion of truth behind all of these claims, all of these people experiencing all these wild events, these crazy things that cannot be deciphered, that cannot be understood by science. And this is myself included. I've had crazy experiences that doesn't fall into the category of science. The more people I meet, the more people I speak to, sort of confirm this to me. And as I travel the world, as I get more involved in different cultures and understand them, as I open my mind more, as I am a very curious person and I explore, I search, let me tell you that what I have found, what I have experienced, what I have read from who I believe to be credible people is extremely convincing, to the point that I don't know if I can deny it anymore. Like, there's always going to be some form of skepticism in the back of my mind. That atheist part of me still ticks, still saying, no, there's got to be some logical reason behind this. Let's scrutinize it, there's got to be something that makes sense. But the more you scrutinize it, the more you realize how absurd everything is. So, first we need to base this on the notion. So you're probably thinking, if this does exist, how does it exist? Why does it exist? So you've got to think first of reality. What is reality to you? Is reality the same to you as it is to me? Is reality the same to you as any other person on this planet? We all experience our own personal first-person perspective of reality. No one can share your personal reality with you because reality is subjective. Sure, maybe we are all sharing this universal plane somehow. We all share these experiences. We interact and communicate with real people. But I believe it's much more subjective and it's much more complicated than you could ever imagine. So let me get into this. I want to talk about 3 different concepts. I'm going to talk about the spiritual paradigm, the scientific paradigm, and the cultural paradigm, and how all of these connect together. I want to explain some of this, again, in your own language, in logic, to try and help you make sense of this, to help you understand people from all corners of the globe, from all cultures, from all backgrounds, who are having these crazy experiences, who believe that there is something more, and actually put the pieces together to try and gain a broader understanding of reality. First, I'm going to speak about the scientific paradigm. So, first I want to say that science is incredible, and any logical person, any right-minded person will support science. So the thing about science is that it is extremely precise and it is very efficient. But science does still have its limitations, and I'll explain why. So, when we break down reality, we can pretty much come to the conclusion that everything is information. And information needs to be interpreted, it needs to be understood, it needs to be conceptualized. So, science is a language which interprets said information in its own way. And just like the world, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different languages which all communicate different sets of information to one another. But no language can convey exactly the same set of information as another language. So you think about romantic languages like Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian. These are known to be very emotional languages, very dramatic. So they convey emotion more so than, let's say, Germanic languages, which are more efficient, more precise, and more logical. So, even though these languages are conveying different sets, even though these languages are conveying essentially the same thing, they are conveying it in a different way, in a different language. So information is lost in the process. Some information is conveyed easier than others, and some carry more meaning, some carry different sets of meaning in different ways. Each language has its own advantage and disadvantage. So you need to see science and spirituality as different languages to understand reality. They are different languages of reality which each have their own pros and cons. So science, again, is extremely efficient, and one of the great benefits of science is that it is accurate. So science goes through all of these systems, they go through all of these structures to filter out all of the bullshit. This is what makes science plausible. This is what makes science valid, because it is reliable. To get scientific evidence for something to be proven, it needs to be peer-reviewed, it needs to be researched and trialed again and again and again to get the same conclusions. Science is based off mathematics, which again is very precise and easy to conceptualize different things, easy to figure out different things based on this language. So science is great for that, because we know that what is discovered by science is true. And we can tell so much more about the universe, about the way things work, about physics and whatnot through science alone. So science breaks down the mesh of reality and makes it easier to understand through its precision. But there is still so much that science does not know. There is a lot that science may never be able to know, because it is a specific language that can only convey and understand a certain amount of information. The thing is that science is still in its infancy. It hasn't been born yet. You look at human nature, you look at our history, and it really wasn't long ago that science came into birth. Perhaps it has been hundreds of years until the first concept of scientific measurements and these theories came into play. So, in the time span of everything, you look at the human genus before us, the time span of Earth and life, a few hundred years is literally nothing. So, science is still yet to be born. We might think we are so smart and sophisticated, that we have the best technologies, that we are extremely inquisitive, but the truth is we have barely even begun. We don't know what we don't know, and this is what makes it so interesting. Because science goes off the notion that there is a set limit of information in the universe, and we are building our way up to that set limit as our capabilities evolve. But our capabilities are still extremely minuscule at the moment. Our technology is primitive. Our intelligence is primitive. Our consciousness is primitive. So we really don't know what we don't know. We don't know how much information is out there, what can be deciphered. And you even look at current concepts that are just starting to come into play, that we are just starting to find out about. We really know nothing about them, and we can admit that we know nothing about them, which is good. Of course, this doesn't stop us searching for answers. We always want to discover more. We want to be precise. We want to understand every tiny fragment of information to enhance our overall capabilities, to improve the, you could say, intelligence of our collective consciousness. But you look at concepts that are so far out of our reach that we have no idea what they are. You look at black holes, you look at dark matter, you look at the fact that our entire universe was conceived from a singularity, which, of course, in our current scientific model, doesn't make sense. This literally is the findings of science, but it doesn't make sense under the current structure of science. Meaning that to further understand these concepts, science needs to change. The paradigms of science need to change. Everything about science needs to change in order to accommodate these new research and findings and views and everything that we are discovering. So, the vast majority of information, we do not know what it is. And that's not to say that information is probably limitless. That the more we discover things, the more there is going to be to discover. So, you look at cells, you look at atoms, different molecules, you look at quarks, leptons, elementary particles, quantum physics. And this is incredible, but it keeps going. There's always going to be more to discover, and the deeper we get into each concept, the more foreign and far-fetched and alien it becomes. So that's not to say that perhaps thousands of years in the future, hundreds of thousands, millions of years in the future, science might discover these same sort of principles and philosophies and actually prove what this ancient wisdom of spirituality has been trying to decipher for a very long time. They might prove in their own language and be able to convey what spirituality can't. So this is an exciting thought because we don't know our capabilities, we don't know where we are going to go, we don't know how far our technology can improve and what we can learn and understand. But remember that science is only one way of looking at the universe. And it's a very masculine way as well. It's a masculine paradigm. It's associated with the left hemisphere, which means it's logical and structured. But if you look at concepts of, say, the yin-yang, this needs to be balanced by another constituent. In this case, it is spirituality, which is a more intuitive, experiential side of it all. So keep this in mind when you think science is the end-all, science is the key to literally everything. That perhaps science just can't decipher information which spirituality can in its own language. Perhaps science is still very limited in this day and age, and that in the future it might start understanding these concepts more. It might start proving these concepts even. Then what's going to happen when that day comes? Our entire reality is going to disassemble. We are going to see everything in a completely different way, because there's going to be no distance between science and spirituality anymore. Maybe they'll be on the same page. Maybe science will prove these things in a very logical and structured way, may prove in its own language that consciousness returns to some etheric source. Even look at some of the concepts now. You look at 5-dimensional space. How much do you really know about that? 5-dimensional space is scientific speculation. All of this is. It's very plausible that it works under the current scientific model. But the more you dig into it, the more you research it, the more just weird and crazy it becomes. And the more you research it, the more you realize that it is not so different from many of these spiritual ideologies. Okay, so now we are going to look at the spiritual paradigm. We have discussed science in a nutshell and what it is, its advantages, its limitations, and now we are going to talk about what spirituality is and how it can work. So first, understand that science and spirituality are not opposing forces. Any intelligent person, any logical person who believes in spirituality will also endorse science. They do not contradict each other. This is the first thing you need to understand. There are no contradictions. They work in synergy with one another. If anything, again, going back to this concept of the yin-yang, they work together to make a complete. You can call it science, the masculine, and spirituality, the feminine. These paradigms complete each other in different ways. 2 different languages to interpret this material existence. So, spirituality is extremely complicated. It is so far beyond our comprehension that almost there's no point even trying to understand it. We've got to understand that we are animals. We are these flawed, limited creatures that cannot comprehend what is out there. We can get glimpses and ideas. We can understand notions. We can use metaphors and signposts. But we can't really comprehend what this means. We can't comprehend a whole nother dimensional plane, because that said plane does not exist on the same form as time, space, matter. So these are constructs of our universe, of this material existence, and that's what science examines. Science examines this physical reality, but spirituality looks at why this physical reality exists, how this physical reality exists, and where it came from. So the way I think of it is that science looks at a jigsaw. So imagine it as a jigsaw puzzle, reality as a jigsaw puzzle. So science puts all the little pieces together by examining every little bit, while spirituality looks at the picture that all these pieces create. So without having sort of both constituents, there's really no point, because science can put all the pieces together and make the full framework, but it's not going to look at the actual picture, what the picture is showing. Likewise, spirituality might not be so good at actually putting the pieces together, but it can actually comprehend the entire picture and what the picture is showing. So this is fundamental to understand when exploring these concepts, and by sort of being inquisitive, being curious, and trying to understand it a little more. So the thing about spirituality is that it has been prevalent. These concepts and ideas have been prevalent all over humanity since the dawn of time, essentially. since the dawn of humanity. So when the human genus first, Homo sapiens, first came out of Africa, we started spreading around. Quick history lesson. And first thing that started happening is religions started being built and formed. So religions are very ancient. But where did they come from? Why did they come up? And why do they have such a profound influence? You'd think if one person just started speaking out of his ass and talking about these concepts, it's not going to gain any grip. People are just going to think he's an idiot. Yet, religions have become so prominent and so profound, probably for good reason. And I'm not saying a religion is necessarily correct. I know there's a lot of bullshit in religions because they have been diluted over time. Religions are metaphors, which all hold some validity, so no religion is necessarily incorrect, no religion is necessarily correct, but I do believe that every religion is pointing towards what we can consider the truth. So religions popped up all over the world, and this is interesting because this was well before different cultures had the ability to communicate. So you think now the world is so connected, and it makes sense that, say, a religion can travel around the world, different people resonate with it, different people pick up the ideologies and adopt it too. But before people could communicate across cultures, because we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the wisdom, intuition, intuitiveness, how did these religions, which appear so similar on the inside, sort of pop up in the first place? Where did they come from? So a religion, again, is an interpretation of what we can consider ultimate truth. So a religion is sort of like, it's got a core, which may be correct, and you look into the core of every religion, and they're all pretty much the same. They say the same thing. But every religion has layers and layers of fat around it. So once you cut the fat around the outside, you see that every religion is essentially the same. They're all trying to depict the same thing in their own ways, in their own forms. But again, over time, dissemination, word of mouth, corruption, these core ideologies have been corrupted in some form. They have been diluted. And of course, that's going to happen over time, especially when people have ego in the way. People change things. People think in a different way. People spread lies. And that's why you get all the bullshit today, and you get extremists who actually have no fucking idea what a religion is about, but they endorse it. You get hardcore Christians who will try and convert you, who will try and indoctrinate you, but they actually have no fucking idea what the religion is about. They don't know the core meaning behind it. And they've taken that out because the core meaning always involves the goodness, about being good. It always involves some sort of concept of spirit, of soul, some form of ultimate reality, often deities or supreme sort of beings that are far beyond our comprehension. But these people won't actually understand what the religion is trying to say. So they pull it to a biased extreme and try and convert other people. So you get bullshit plaguing the entire world because people pull out what they want from these religions without seeing the core of every religion. So another thing you want to learn is that there's sort of universal truth behind every religion, behind every ideology, spiritual ideology and whatnot, is that there appears to be some form of ultimate reality, some form of creator, which links to humanity in some way, which links to consciousness, and that we are literally specks in the ocean. So you think of the Earth, how tiny it is compared to the universe. It is nothing compared to the universe. And the way spirituality often depicts it, sort of the common consensus of spirituality, is that the universe is a speck in a whole nother dimension. And this dimension is literally infinite in the way we cannot comprehend. That it's got millions, billions, if not an infinite amount of sentient beings, of spirits, and it is very structured, there's a lot happening, there's a lot going on. And that there are some forces of karma at play, so we do get reincarnated over and over again until we burn off our karma and essentially reach enlightenment, which seems to be the ultimate goal of life. So the way I understand it is that consciousness is external to the human form. So we all come from what we can call a source, which is also depicted in Buddhism, Hinduism, interpreted in Christianity, in Islam, as heaven, hell, so paradise. So there is some sort of source that you could almost call it one single entity, one huge entity that splits off. So this entity splits off and consciousness goes into every living thing on this planet. Like tiny, you can say, fragment of consciousness goes into us, and we consider that the soul. So we come here to be individual, to be separate, to be different. And that is the whole purpose of it, is that we experience life as an individual, and we eventually die, and we accumulate the experience. So that seems to be what this entity of sorts wants, is experience to try and actually grow and develop and expand. And the more it does that, the more it's going to start, who even knows, the more it's going to start developing, the more it can expand, because that seems to be the main drive of all life that isn't just universal to life on this planet, but it could be a universal thing that goes through dimensions. The need to expand for some reason, the need to grow, otherwise there is stagnation. So conscious energy goes into every little thing, it experiences it, dies, goes back to the source, and the source has accumulated that knowledge, that wisdom. So it's growing, it is gaining more and more intelligence to become a bigger and bigger intellect. And again, no one really knows why it does that, no one really knows what the reason is, but that appears to be it. So the point of that is, so we can experience everything, every aspect of reality in every different way, and learn to so I can learn and understand and grow from it. That seems to be the purpose of it all, but again, no one knows. So this sort of entity could be considered God, because it is so powerful, and we are all literally fragments of it. We are all a part of it that come back. And when we all join back with this entity of sorts, that could be considered nirvana, paradise, heaven, whatever concept it has through religions. So that could be where all these religions and these concepts come from. This could be real people like Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. Could have been real people who actually went back and came back to their body, which is almost impossible unless you're an extremely enlightened being. And then they wanted to spread their wisdom and their philosophies about reconnecting with Source. And we don't know whether this is the only entity in existence. We don't know whether there are other ones like that or not. But it seems to exist in a whole new realm, whether it created it or not, whether it has creators. Again, maybe it's infinite, maybe it's like a fractal that we can't comprehend. The further you go, the bigger it gets, and it just never ends. There's always something bigger. Likewise, there's always something smaller. But in conclusion, all I can say is, if you think of an ant, Can an ant comprehend our society, our human structure, our existence? No, it has no fucking idea because it's an ant. It doesn't know what exists. It doesn't know what there is. So, in essence, we are those ants. We are trying to comprehend something so much bigger than us. But again, we are very primitive and simple creatures that simply just don't know what is out there. Alright, and the last one I want to speak about is culture. So I'm really not going to say anything new in this. I'm just going to go into more detail about different cultures and their perspectives of things. So every culture in the world has some sort of beliefs that relate to, just say, ultimate reality, some divine truth behind everything that we can understand, that we can perceive and comprehend in this human existence. So you look at essentially every indigenous tribe in the world. I've never heard of an indigenous tribe that didn't have any spiritual beliefs. Every major religion, every culture has their own beliefs about this. And again, shear the wool, trim the fat, and they essentially say the same things in their own interpretations. So to me, this is a huge indication that there must be something real about this. There must be some truth behind this all. So I think people are having legitimate experiences where they go into this whole new realm of experience, where you can call ultimate reality, you can call the spirit realm, astral planes, whatever you want to call it. And they are actually pulling out profound wisdom from it. And other people are seeing that, learning from it, and this information is being disseminated throughout their cultures. And of course, in our day and age where everything is more connected, so that all of these cultures and all this information has become convoluted and mixed. So we sort of have a mix of everything happening everywhere now, because we have had time to really spread these ideologies and these philosophies. But you look at, let's say, the Western paradigm. So atheism is a new concept. Atheism is, in a way, pulling science to an extreme, where atheism is only based on science, but believes that nothing beyond science exists in a way. So Western culture sort of brought in atheism because Western culture is masculine, is very logical. So it believes what it sees. It believes in what it can actually prove, which again is fair enough. But this has sort of been pulled to an extreme. It's been convoluted, and people really almost worship atheism. People worship science when science is merely a tool to understand reality. So you need to understand that as well, that atheism is an extreme, the same as religious fanatics. That's the opposite extreme. But there is a middle ground between everything, between all these cultures, between all of these different beliefs, between what is happening. So let's talk about sort of what exists, what is a fairy tale, what doesn't. So first thing is, let's talk about, do spirits exist? Are there different spirits that we can even perceive? Perhaps as humans, if we can develop these abilities? And the answer is, of fucking course there are. Yes, there are definitely spirits. Spirits are one of the first things you are going to start understanding, start learning about, start even perceiving once you start going down this rabbit hole. So the more you get involved in this, the more you start connecting all the dots and you start becoming more curious and you start seeing things you can say the more your perception of reality starts changing. And spirits are definitely something that is prevalent through every single culture in the world. Every indigenous culture, every big culture, every mainstream culture, they all believe in some forms of spirits. Some cultures interpret spirits, and some religions interpret spirits as as angels and demons. Some interpret spirits as deities. Some interpret spirits as ghosts, as phantoms, as poltergeists. But is there truth to this? Yes, there is. Who knows how far it's been pulled out of proportion, but in my beliefs, and I'm quite comfortable in my beliefs, there are definitely spirits. Because I believe I have seen such spirits, and they take the form of as orbs, which radiate colours and they move around. Some are like silhouettes, and you can see them. And again, most people won't be able to perceive spirits, but many people do. And throughout the last few years, I've spoken with hundreds of people who have all told me very convincing stories of their encounters with the paranormal and the supernatural. And again, if I heard this maybe 6 or 7 years ago, while I was still an atheist, I'd be very skeptical. I wouldn't believe them. I'd think that they're just making that up for attention, for whatever they want. But surely it couldn't be true. But you keep speaking to people, you keep finding out more. And you just keep seeing these commonalities, and people seem very authentic as well. What purpose do these people have to lie to you? Why would they try and fool you into believing something that they don't believe themselves, that they haven't actually experienced and seen? And then it happens with so many different people that there must be some connection here, there must be some commonality. And the more you start to perceive these things, the more you can say, it's sort of like a spiral. You start getting more interested in it, you start perceiving it more. Then you start, again, getting more into it because you are perceiving them. And then you start perceiving them more. And it becomes extremely realistic, extremely lifelike, to the point it becomes undeniable. And of course, you can't tell this to most people in mainstream. Most people in this who are stuck in this Western atheist paradigm, because most won't understand. They've got their own beliefs, they've got their own thoughts that this doesn't exist. They've never had these experiences. They've never had these sort of crazy out-of-body experiences and no contact with, say, spirits and entities and things like that. So of course they're not going to believe you. And they've got good reason to as well, because their whole lives they've been in their own sort of mindset. They've been stuck into believing this is what there is, this is reality, and nothing extends beyond reality. There is no five-dimensional space, there are no alternate realms, there's no spirit of consciousness, there's just us, biological life forms, and everything happened as a coincidence. So, if you tell someone that you see spirits, that you can perceive these things, what are they going to think? They are going to think that you are full of absolute crap, because this is going to challenge their beliefs. And of course, the ego will not want to admit that it is wrong, that your whole life has been a lie. Your whole paradigm of reality is incorrect. No one wants to admit that. No one wants to face that because people are comfortable in their beliefs. But it does seem like more and more people are coming out about these experiences. And as I mentioned earlier, there are literally millions of reports around the world of people having these sort of experiences, people having paranormal and supernatural experiences, to the point that it becomes hard to deny. And they are very convincing. The more you read, the more books you read, the more you start digging into this, the more you'll understand, and your mind will start expanding. And you'll see that what we once knew, or what we once thought we knew, is a slither in an endless ocean. That there's so much more out there. You just need to start searching. That's the thing. In Western culture, most people are not curious. They don't give a crap. They don't want to start digging for answers, and they are happy to remain how they are, in ignorance. But I can almost assure you that if you're an atheist right now and you're still watching this video, if you really start digging, you start spending the next few years traveling, start really getting to know cultures, start digging into beliefs, digging into religions and all these things, start really trying to learn about this, you will be convinced yourself. You'll start connecting the dots and you'll see it from a completely different angle. But once you do, you won't know how to communicate this to the people who don't believe in it, because you've sort of lost that connection now. And it will frustrate you because people are closed-minded. People don't want to believe that there is more than what we see and perceive in this reality. Again, reality has layers. Who knows how many, but it has layers. And it gets incredibly complicated. So there's no point really trying to understand everything, but to me at least, being comfortable in my beliefs that there is something beyond this, it's a very nice feeling. It's nice thinking that I could die tomorrow and I'll be happy because I know I've been a good person, I know I've done my best, and I do solely believe that I will just move on to another place. That this sort of hallucination is going to end, and boom, I'm back. Spirit, everything will come back to me. So that's a good thought. And it's not blind faith. It is definitely not blind faith. This has been scrutinized, this has been researched, this has been experienced firsthand. This has been seen. And the more I dig into it, the more I see. The more I see it. To the point that I cannot be a skeptic anymore. I cannot deny that there are forces beyond us